South African job market remains volatile despite some positive developments in artificial intelligence and other technology-related areas. According to the most recent Pnet job market trends report, local hiring fell by 8% on an annual basis and 11% month-on-month between January and February this year. That's as employment activity for cleaning, maintenance and repair works has decreased over the last 2 months. Meanwhile, hiring activity for management experts dropped marginally. On the other hand, placement for salespeople surged, while an 183% rise has been reported in AI jobs. Pnet Data Insights head Paul Byrne speaks to us about this activity. Thank you, as always, for your time, Paul. The current trends that we are seeing in the job market, what are they telling us about the South African climate?
It's been a very difficult time. The last 12 months have been, the job market's been up and down, so hugely volatile. I think in the latest trends report, and you've just given the figures in terms of us being 8% down year on year, I think it's indicative of where we find ourselves in February specifically, which is with the data that we're looking at. That was the beginnings of the first murmurings of potential VAT increases. Plus, we had the Trump administration that was now in place. And I think businesses here in South Africa were just waiting to hear the outcomes of both of those before making the decisions on whether or not they would be hiring to sort of aggressively increase their business potential over the year. So, yeah, unfortunately, what we've seen is that decrease in hiring activity for the month.
Is this trajectory expected to continue then as we, face the halfway mark of 2025? And of course, South Africa has always had that long-standing concern about a high unemployment rate.
Very much so. To me, it's difficult to call at this stage. I think the markets are so fragile at the moment as we're trying to let the dust settle in all of the activities, both local and global. So it's very difficult to predict what's going to happen. Early suggestions are that March numbers are looking slightly up in terms of where we found ourselves in February. That's a good indicator, but as I say, that's really early at this stage, and I can't even really give any comment on what's driving that at this stage. What was interesting for me in looking at a couple of months of our data trends is that we saw a gradual progression in terms of the types of jobs and industries that were securing or advertising jobs within South Africa. And back in January, we were talking about the December numbers had seen that architecture and engineering roles had grown, as well as building and construction and warehouse and logistics. And for me, those were the early indicators of something starting to happen in the market, and that was quite positive. That was quickly followed by an increase, a significant increase. I'm talking about a 45% year-on-year increase in the hiring of marketing professionals that came out in our February results, our January results that we published in February. And that, for me, is always marketing, as we know, sort of is where the budgets are initially cut when businesses are struggling. So to see those professionals being in demand again suggested some good news for the market. And then now in this March report, looking back at February, we'd seen the business and management, as you said, had grown when we're looking at the year-on-year figures. And the sales positions had grown as well. So that's suggesting that the right underlying movement is there in terms of supporting an increase in business, and therefore naturally that progresses into hiring activity. But yeah, I'm still not comfortable calling it given the uncertainty that we're seeing in both, again, the local and the global markets.
Absolutely warranted, but the rise of AI roles in South Africa is also becoming an exciting one to watch. Talk to us about where we sit at this point.
Very much so. We've looked at some data that kind of identified for us which are the industries that are employing AI skills at the moment. And on the flip side, we've looked at sort of the demand in terms of at least the supply of that skill in terms of where AI professionals are finding work, in terms of what industries they're finding that work. So if I start with the actual industries, it was about a year ago that we actually did the initial investigations that back then already suggested that 183% increase in the types of job postings that were being posted for IT, at least for AI specialists. And specifically, not surprisingly, 62% of the industries that we identified at that stage that were employing the AI skills were information technology. And then 10% was actually sitting in the education sector, suggesting that institutions were preparing themselves for this rapid increase in the demand for AI skills. But then we also saw finance and consulting appearing as job categories in which AI skills were getting deployed more and more, and companies were looking to employ those skills. And then very interestingly, self-initiated projects, which for us was an indication that there are a lot of small businesses that are starting to think about what they could be doing in this space. And that's the start of hopefully some great things to come. On the flip side, when we're looking at the actual supply, what we did is we looked in this year, 5 years back, and we saw that there's a 96% increase in the employment of AI professionals in terms of people actually sitting in these roles. So what that led us to do is to look at what type of roles they are. And specifically when we're looking at these skills, there's no surprise, the majority once again are sitting within the IT sector. Yeah. We're looking at about 88% of all of the skills in South Africa are within that IT sector, specifically your software developers, your data science experts, your AI experts. What is interesting is that out of that, about 45% of those people already are accomplished AI developers and AI engineers. And really, for me, that shows that rapid growth in the demand for this skill. And I think we're going to see that increase significantly. Last 2 points on that, 27% of the people that are in the IT space are what we call AI trainers, which are those people that are responsible for making sure that the data that the AI engines are giving us is actually right. And they're just testing the data all the time. And once again, that's just talking to the importance of people actually upgrading, upskilling these systems to make sure that they're reliable in terms of what it is that they can provide to us. And then interesting, business management is about responsible for about 5% of the employment of AI skills in South Africa. Education, 4% in terms of where people are actually sitting at the moment.
The latter is absolutely fascinating, and the biggest concern, though, is the overall picture of the jobs in South Africa and the balancing of that scale in terms of creating and retaining employment in this country. Thank you, as always, for your input. Paul Byrne is with Pnet talking to us this evening.